It's the European elections this week, and I have quite a lot to say about them. I'm going to try and condense this down into one video, not only to make sure I get across the 10-minute mark for the algorithm and everything, but because I really don't want to dwell on this for the rest of the week. I'll probably do something in the aftermath talking about the results, but that's probably about it. So I want to comment on the campaign. I want to try to get you to understand why I am so dead set against Brexiting and why I believe that the referendum was invalid, and why at the very least we need a new confirmatory referendum. And then if you do want to take a stand against the Brexit Party, if you are pro-Remain, I want to give some advice on how you should probably vote based on the polling information in the various regions and so on. And then at the end, instead of links to other ones of my videos, I'm going to link you to two very informative videos, which I think are well worth watching. So I would suggest humbly that you watch all the way through, right to the end, after the credits, where the crows start going off, and there's a couple of really good videos that I think you should watch that I'll link to there. So let's get started. Now, I try to be scrupulously fair and ethical. People who follow my channel for the right reasons seem to value and appreciate that. It does seem to annoy people on both sides for differing reasons, but I do try to hove to that. I'll fail. Everyone fails to be objective or completely ethical from time to time. I think what's important is that you make the effort and that you try. So while I might be entirely opposed to Sargon, certainly on the Brexit issue and many other things, I do think it's important to be fair, and I have been utterly disgusted by the way that he and Dankula have been treated through all of this. The constant lies that they're racist or sexist, and that's all anyone ever wants to talk about, when there's so much more to talk about. The corruption, the anti-democratic illegality of the Leave campaign, the dark money that has funded UKIP and now the Brexit Party, the Brexit Party's complete lack of policies, UKIP's policies that are in direct contravention of Sargon's claim to be liberal, like their idea to bang more people up in prison and vastly expand the prison system, and so on. There's all these meaningful, significant lines of attack to go at, and all the promises from the Leave campaign that involved many the UKIP and Brexit Party figures. There's all this kind of material stuff that you can go after, the illegality, their actual party manifestos, things that they've actually done. But no, everyone's just gone after them on this completely fallacious racist and sexist trip, and that ultimately only helps them. It cements and hardens their support. The kinds of people that wouldn't vote for them never would anyway, so that doesn't help them. And that small portion of people in the middle that will actually go and check and look up on these things and see what was actually said and the context and everything else, they're going to be moved more to be in sympathy with Carl and Dankula and people like that, because they'll see how ludicrous it is to accuse them of racism or sexism in those ways. I mean, the rape tweet thing is the most obvious here. What Sargon did, now I've caught a bit of flack for apparently being hypocritical on this. It was brilliant at the time, but when you move it into a public political context, less so. What it did was it showed up Jess Phillips for being opportunistic, exploitative, dishonest, that she would push for censorship no matter what attention she got on the internet. So I think it was useful. But now that it's being brought up in a political context, running for office is a whole different ballgame. But still, it's grotesquely unfair how they've been treated, and it pisses me off to no end, and tactically, it's a bad move. Now, political violence has been escalating. I wouldn't consider milkshaking or egging or flowering or tooting horns or whatever at people as violence. It's childish, it's stupid, it increases sympathy for the target rather than undermining them, but it's not violence. But at the same time, there is more political violence, beatings, fights, vandalism. A Tory councillor had their home firebombed. It's not good. Things like this are concerning, but milkshaking, not so much. It's just stupid and tactically idiotic. And besides, it's not lactose they're intolerant to. Try throwing a Muslim at them. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything here, nor am I going to lead you by the nose. I encourage you, if you find any of my statements or anything to be outrageous, to look into this and investigate for yourselves, because as usual, unless I'm talking about something really specific, I think that's what everyone should do. You should look into things for yourself. You shouldn't listen to any talking head, whether it's me, Carl, Sticks, anyone. You should always investigate for yourself, and that goes double for stories in the mainstream media. You should always go and investigate and look and drill down and find the studies. And I know it's exhausting and tiring and uses up a lot of time that would be better used for fun things, but yeah, that way you know your own mind, right? So anything I say, feel free to go and look. The referendum on leaving the European Union was corrupt and by any legal standard invalid and should have been overturned. And the only reason that it wasn't overturned was because it was considered advisory. Now, I don't care what the party manifesto said, those aren't binding. You have to go and you have to look at the bill that introduced the referendum and made it happen. And that specified that it was advisory. And that is the only reason the result has not been overturned by the High Court. The Electoral Commission found an enormous amount of wrongdoing on the part of the Leave campaign and some small accounting, bookkeeping and so on errors in the Remain campaign. They fined the Leave campaign as much as they could, and they fined the Remain campaign £19,000, as I recall. Now, you'll probably whine and say, oh, the government sent a pamphlet round and, that somehow counts as being part of the Remain campaign. It doesn't. Governments are entitled to give their advice as the government on these things, and that's separate to any campaigns. Plus, if you go back and you look at the government leaflet, it was remarkably accurate without delving into the same hyperbole that the official Remain campaign occasionally delved into. So it was invalid. It's undemocratic. It was corrupt. There was a massive overspend, and where that money came from is still pretty grey. There were fake stunts organised during the campaign to get people more dead set against Europe. Plus we've got 40 years of tabloid bullshit about bananas and so on to look back on. There's all of this stuff, both in the long term and in the very short term. Dark Facebook adverts, misleading and targeting specific people. There's a very good German documentary about this that you can find in English online if you want to watch it and follow up on that. A lot of that funding came from Aaron Banks, who has flounced out of being interrogated by Parliament. And what's particularly interesting is that though the money appeared to come from Aaron Banks and into the Leave campaign, it couldn't have, because he was pretty broke at that time. Now, he alleges it came from investments in diamond mines, but they're not operating, and so to all intents and purposes don't exist and couldn't have been the source of the money. It's all very dodgy, and essentially you guys who voted Leave, you were played for chumps by these people. They're not anti-establishment, they are establishment. They're not anti-elite, they are elite. Look at Farage, look at Jacob Rees-Mogg and his sister. These are not people of the common touch. These are not working class people. These are people who will be fine when it's disastrous, and it will be disastrous. It wasn't the Remain campaign that lied to you. They may have exaggerated a bit, but the economy should have grown by 2% more than it did. Okay, that's not a recession, but it is stunted growth as a result of the Brexit vote, and we haven't even left yet. An estimated 250,000 jobs, last time I checked, which was a couple of weeks ago, so it's probably higher now, have disappeared because of the Brexit vote. And if we actually Brexit, that's going to be worse. You know, a lot of pressure, additional pressure, has been put on the NHS. Just yesterday, I was covering news stories about that, about the increasing shortfall in nurses and other key staff, doctors, and it's not just in the health service that we have this problem. And this is all staff that the Remain campaign predicted and said was going to happen to one degree or another, and it has. You know, the drop in the pound, all of that. The experts that Gove summarily dismissed turned out to be right. Who could have foreseen such an eventuality? People that have devoted their lives to understanding these things, economics, society, employment, all of that, they turned out to be right. Who knew? And what promises were you sold on? Well, the Brexit campaign back then didn't really know what it meant by Brexit. People talking about Norway or Canada Plus or Swiss models of being part of the EU but not really being part of the EU, or of being separate but linked. We were going to get a great deal, all the cards were in our hands. Didn't turn out that way, did it? You were lied to, and you're being lied to again this time by the Brexit Party, by UKIP, by these arch levers, and you're being played for chumps again, and unfortunately you all seem to be falling for it again, and it's hard to see how anyone can penetrate through that. I mean, people are revising history in their own minds that, we always wanted a hard Brexit, we always wanted to leave on the hardest terms possible. That isn't what was campaigned for, that isn't what was talked about. And that would be utterly ruinous. Even now, right? Even now, going into these EU elections, which shouldn't be another referendum on the European Union, but it may be the only vote that we're going to get. Even now, they can't agree on exactly what kind of Brexit they want. And again, we're hearing Norway, we're hearing Switzerland, we're hearing all of these models and ideas of how we might go into the future with our relationship with the EU, and they can't agree. A lot of that is not the hard Brexit that you guys seem to want for some masochistic reason. So there's still no clearly defined idea of what Brexit is. And this Brexit Party has come out of nowhere, and its funding is extremely dodgy. A lot of it seems to have come from overseas, which is illegal. Whether it's been laundered or not, a lot of it seems to be just beneath the threshold for scrutiny that exists for party funding. I mean, literally just below, and repeated donations. The Electoral Commission is now finally starting to look into the Brexit Party's funding. Now, this election is legally binding. It's not advisory. So if they have engaged in the same electoral shenanigans, this time it could overturn results and force another round of European elections and the removal of people who do get elected from office, assuming they ever get to assume office, of course. A lot of you say, whether you agree with Brexit or not, that you feel compelled to go along with it because of the will of the people, the 17.4 million people, and we have to respect the result of the election. Balderdash, Piffle and Poppycock. If an election is corrupted, if people involved break the law, what usually happens is that you rerun that election. It's not democratic to force through a decision that was won, at least in part, it would seem, remembering how narrow this vote was, by illegality. That's not democratic. And no amount of waffling and shaking your jowls is going to make any difference to that. If you truly care about democracy, you should also be demanding a second clean vote, which surely you believe that you can win, right? Surely you understand that and believe that if there was a second vote, you could win. Of course, the only deal you're ever likely to get is May's deal, which many of you don't seem to want. So maybe that's the real reason you don't want another vote, because you know you'd lose on any actually defined terms. But I think you deserve a fair crack of the whip. A second vote, a confirmatory referendum, something like that, run cleanly without interference, with much more oversight, so that we can actually believe in and trust in whatever result happens around. And hey, what the fuck, let's make it binding this time. With Remain now leading consistently in every poll of the public that is performed, reaching the level of 61% now being pro-Remain versus May's deal, you would think that the Remain parties would be doing better in the polling for the European elections. I think there's a variety of reasons why they're not, and why we should be wary about taking this as a explicit stand-in for a second referendum. I think there's also a big reason why the Brexit Party, despite not having any policies, despite having the most obnoxious, horrible people in charge of it, in spite of the dodgy money and everything, there's good reasons that they're doing well, and that's they're a single issue party at a single issue time. Whereas there is no single party that is the Remain party, for want of a better term. So you have a single issue with one party, UKIP's fallen away almost entirely at this point, versus a mishmash of people. Plus you have party tribalism involved. There's some die-hard Conservatives, there's a lot of die-hard Labour supporters who can't countenance voting for anything else, and we know that a minority of Conservatives are still pro-Remain, and we know that a majority of the Labour Party membership and voters are pro-Remain. So that introduces an element of randomness, but even so, if you look at the sort of headline polling, the national polling, Remain parties, which includes the nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales, for example, when you top that up and compare it to the explicitly Leave parties, it's ahead, and then you have the wishy-washy Labour and Conservatives making up the difference, and a few independents and others as well that don't really register. I do wish they'd do more breakdowns of the other parties, because I find all that fascinating, but that's just me. So that's why I think the Remain parties aren't necessarily doing so well. They're divided, they're split up, and they're taking more harm, I think, from the political tribalism than the Brexit Party is, because the left wing seems to be a bit more in the realms of party loyalty than the right wing necessarily is. Conservatives used to be different. I think that's a significant change, that a lot of them have jumped ship. But still. So, the European elections are run under a weird kind of hybrid of first past the post and proportional representation. So, tactical voting is less important, but it's still quite important. There's a certain number of positions available in each region, and the highest vote gets a seat, and then their percentage is altered by a certain amount according to the modelling. It varies by region. Then the next highest party gets one, same thing happens again, and the next one gets one, and so it goes until they've all been assigned. So even if your party ends up in second place, if it's a close run thing, and they're going to get roughly the same number of MEPs as whoever won. So smaller parties can get positions, but it's not purely PR. So if you want to really maximise the effect of your vote as a pro-Remain person, you probably need to swallow whatever party loyalty that you might have, and this is particularly speaking to Labour supporters, because they're still being wishy-washy, and suck it up and vote for a Remain party. Now, which party is best to vote for in each area varies. Now, so the largest sample poll, it's 10,000 people, well, 9,000 and a bit, sampled across Britain, was conducted between the 8th and 17th of May. You know, that is a substantial sample given the size of the country. It's going to be pretty accurate. And they not only did the kind of headline voting intentions, but they went through by region. So, according to this polling data, and do check up-to-date data before you do go to the polls, but if you want to send a message that you're pro-Remain, the parties that you should look to vote for in each region are as follows. If you're in the Northeast region, you should vote Liberal Democrat. If you're in the Northwest region, you should vote Liberal Democrat. If you're in the Yorkshire and Humber area, you should vote Liberal Democrat. If you're in the East Midlands, you should vote Liberal Democrat. If you're in the West Midlands, you should vote Green. If you're in the East of England region, you should vote Liberal Democrats. If you're in London, you should vote Liberal Democrats. If you're in the South East, you should vote Liberal Democrats. If you're in the South West, you should vote Liberal Democrats. If you're in Wales, you should vote Plaid Cymru. And if you're in Scotland, you should vote for the SNP. If you want to maximise the effectiveness of your vote, that is how you should vote if you're pro-Remain. And all of the pro-Remain options suggest that there should be a second referendum or a confirmatory referendum, and I think that's the only way forward. Otherwise, we're going to be forced into the position of a simple revocation of Article 50, and I don't think that's good for anybody. So there we go. The elections are coming up. Please do watch the videos I'll link to at the end. And here's hoping the Brexit Party gets a bloody nose. Zang.
The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hot for you here. The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hot for you, Joni, my dear.